Now that we have an existing surface created, we now want to create a proposed surface that we can compare against to create that volume surface for our earthwork. What I have to create a proposed surface, I want to combine the existing information with my proposed information to create a new layer that I can then use to calculate my existing surface. So I'm going to again isolate only my existing contours of the major and a minor. I'm going to choose a major and a minor of my proposed. I don't need to select everything. And I'm going to just choose one edge of a building here. And that should have gathered everything that I need to create an existing, the point information, I'm sorry, the contour information for my existing surface. Excuse me, proposed surface. That's it. But I'm going to create, I'm not going to start editing this. I'm going to copy this to a new layer. Go ahead and choose my, go to layer properties and go ahead and create a new layer. Actually, I want to see if I already created that. No, I did not. So go ahead and create a new layer, and I'm going to call this layer $tin data. I'm going to go ahead and make it a color that stands out. Excuse me, my color was on another window. I'll just go ahead and make it some purple color or some color that that's going to be bright enough that I'm going to see the difference when I actually apply it. I'm also going to make sure it's still a continuous line, just so it represents better. I'm also going to change the line weight to be a little thicker, just so I can really see that I've made that selection. Hit OK. I'll go ahead and close that up. If you notice when you do the $, it actually sorts to the very, very top of your listing there. So what I can now do is, we're still in an isolation of those layers. I'm going to use the command copy to layer as the command. I'm going to select the objects. This is one of the commands that you cannot have elements selected before you type the command. If you type the command with elements selected, it'll deselect the selection. So it's just good to wait for that command to ask you to select those before making that selection. I'll choose enter. It's asking me now to choose the destination layer. I'll choose name. And when it pulls up the palette, it says the very first choice is because it's sorting with the $sign being the first. Tin data is my first choice. Really easy to get to that way. Hit OK. You can see the color now just got really, really bright because we just copied that information to the new layer. We're not done yet. We're still in the command. It's asking us to specify the base point. Just press enter. Accept the default location of the base point of that copy, and we're OK. Now we can press escape. We're out of that command. I'm going to go ahead and re-isolate or replace the layer states here. Once that is set, we can now go ahead and isolate this layer all by itself once again. And what I want to do is clean up these proposed contours so we actually have a new surface completely clean of these crossing areas. So I'll go ahead and use the trim command. I'll go ahead and trim up, I'll treat one contour at a time here. Choose enter, get rid of that line, get rid of this line, get rid of these lines that do not need to be there. So it should be trimming these things up. I'll do trim again. I could try trimming all of these at once, and I did try doing that in class if you remember, but what was happening is it did not, let me pull up here, this one, it wasn't behaving exactly the way I was hoping it to. So I'm just going to go and continue the same technique. Use the trim command again. Choose this thing, enter, get rid of that, escape, trim. Choose the swell coming up. I'm going to try both of these this time. Get in there. Actually, I could delete that by itself. That's just a separate element that's no longer needed. Erase that out. I'll try to do a little bit more here. Delete that, delete that. Good. Almost there. I think I got everything. Now what we want to make sure we have set is everything set to elevation. If we look at this stuff, when I select everything, I look at everything from the side view, you can see, because I never set the elevation, all the proposed contours have to be set to elevation. So I'm going to use that quick properties palette again, which was already turned on. We have our contours 147. This one is 145. We want to set this elevation to 145. I might as well go ahead and select all of the 145s. And we can type it at once, 145, enter. Once they're set, we're going to then join them. So this is the 144 as we're going downhill. The quick properties makes this so much more simpler. I don't like having to pull up a whole properties dialog here. This will be 143. If you're not sure if it's 143, you can always click the next adjacent piece. This should be 142. $141. Actually, it says varies. Let's make sure I got this right. 141. That's right. 140. And now we're going to join them. So these two, we're going to try to join them together. It doesn't always work. I'm also turn the quick properties off. I don't need to see those like that. We'll type J, enter. Sometimes it works. That time it worked. Sometimes it doesn't. And if it doesn't, we'll have to go and pick up our pieces and connect our endpoints. That joined. We could select everything at once. I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to let this be methodical and do one at a time. If you select everything at once, it'll only join what can be joined anyway. What I mean by that is if we selected everything and type J, enter, it would only join with the contours that needed to be joined, that could be joined. So those joined. Sometimes it doesn't work, like that one did not work. So what I'm going to do here is actually pull this back and pull this back to the other point. And I want to make sure that should have worked. I just want to make sure I have endpoint turned on as my selection. There's my endpoint. J, enter. Did it join? It did not join. And so now I'm going to wonder, why are these not joining together? That's a 2D polyline. That's a 2D polyline. Also has no elevation. There's no elevation to that. This has to have elevation. So 143, I missed one. That's 143. I'll type J, enter. That now joins. So we need to have them, we want them to be the same type. Polylines will join to 2D polylines, but lines will not join to polylines. That's now correct. That's correct. And you also don't, I'm just doing this to clean it up to make sure I have everything set, but you really, Civil 3D would solve this even without these being joined. What it would have a problem with is if these are crossing, and by joining them, you're verifying that these are clean. This is clean line work. So now I think that's everything. I got every piece is now joined. With that joined, I'm going to go ahead and I can create a surface right now from this existing set of information. I'm not going to use my buildings to create the surface. I'm going to use those in a little bit later as the outline of our buildings in the surface. So I'll go and create another surface. I could either choose to create surface here, or I'll just go straight to the prospector, minimize my existing, right click on surfaces here, say create surface. It's the same thing that if I were to pull it from the menu. And this time I'll type proposed, my proposed surface, hit OK. I created a container for proposed surface. I'll go ahead and choose my definition on my proposed surface, right click, add contours, hit OK. Oh, excuse me. I do not want to hit OK. I want to add contours. This time I want to pay attention to minimize the flat areas. So this is where Civil 3D will actually create extra points. Jeff Bartles, who does the Lynda trainings, calls these CAD magic, and that is where it creates new information to try to minimize flat areas in the drawing. If we do this, Civil 3D will create a lot of points within our flat areas. It'll be a little bit more harder for us to edit that surface, and we want that to be as quick as possible for you all. So we'll go ahead and uncheck these things. I do want to add points to the flat edges though. So we want to have our points, a little bit more points along our contours so we can then join into. I'll show you where those show up when we create the surface. Hit OK. And now we want to go ahead and add our contours. I said we did not want to add our building, so I just selected everything. I'm just going to hold Shift down and do the crossing selection on my buildings. Okay. Now that that is selected, I can then go ahead and create, choose Enter to create my surface. It actually gave me an error this time. It's saying there's a duplicate. I can zoom to it. I'm not sure where that is. So there might be an overlap here, or a surface on top of each other. When I select these, there's only one. I'm going to go ahead and ignore this error. I don't believe this error is going to affect us. So we don't have to accept every error that we see here. We'll just go ahead and ignore that. But it happened. I'll re-pull together. Oh, that's a big issue. So let's see what happened here. What might have happened, and that might be where we have a piece. We're going to look at this from the side. This wasn't a learning moment here. What happened here is there's some element, there's something that has zero information. I'll go ahead and what I'm going to do is actually go back and go back to my ground data. And actually, I'm going to hide this surface for now. What I'm going to do is go to my surface properties, hide this no display. I'll go to my existing data, my tin data, isolate it, and I'm going to select everything but the buildings. Excuse me. Oh, didn't mean to do that. Everything but the buildings, and I'll go ahead and view it from the side. So there is still information down here. And what is this information? Maybe I'll just select all of these. So it's this one contour. This one contour is not showing. In fact, it's not joined. Check this. So it's 143. It's 143. Hit Enter. Now this is live data. So whenever I just made that change to this contour, that elevation change, you see that these definitions just changed. Or not the definitions, but there is a warning sign that this contour, these contours, something's changed within my surface. If I right-click on my proposed surface and say rebuild that surface, first of all, I don't get an error. That was the error that was presented. And whenever I show this surface again, and I'm going to go ahead and make the set those triangles or set the display back again. And I can set that display, by the way, with a surface that's not visible. I can choose surfaces up here. I can see my proposed surface. I can change my display down here to contours and triangles. Hit OK, and you can see that area has gone away. That really deep area, when I look at my contours now from the side, it's a nice, consistent surface. I'm also going to set that boundary like we did on the existing surface. I'll go ahead and go back to my surfaces, proposed, go to my definition of proposed, and choose boundary, add it, non-destructive, choose my property boundary, and there I go. Now it's a little bit cleaned up. So let's look at what this surface just created. It created a bunch of triangulated areas, and you can see a lot of points being added along this curve. That's that setting that happens when Civil 3D will add information to flat areas. This is showing as a flat area, but we have a number of points along this line here to help us try to clean this up. So that created our proposed surface. We need to do some cleaning up, and I'm going to do that in the next tutorial.